Hi everybody, it's meteorologist Joe Cioffi on this Thursday, the second to last day of the month of August of 2018, August 30th, and we're coming up on 7:30 Eastern Time. The shot that you see that way, okay, I'm sorry, so it's like this way, there it is. That is courtesy of our friend and regular Johnny Quest here on YouTube, where he is in the Blue Ridge Mountains in Western Virginia, got hit with another big round of thunderstorms. This is, according to him, what happens when you get almost half a foot of rain in a couple of hours' time. You can see the roads pretty much washed out here, and this only just continues to pile on the Noah's Ark that he has been living in for quite a long time now. And we'll show you what's going on the radar at the moment. Most of those storms have now pushed further to the east, but there's still some rain going on the West Virginia border. This is all part of the frontal boundary that is moving through the eastern part of the United States. We're going to be talking about some changes that, at least for the Northeast, has certainly put an end to the oppressive conditions that have been going on all this week. We actually got a little bit of an easing today because the winds went around to the northwest and north. That brought the dew points down. They were still in the 70s along the immediate coast, but inland dew points dropped down into the 60s. I actually was outside a little while ago, and compared to what it was, it probably by standards it's still rather humid, but just the fact that it's not atrocious like it's been the last few days, you can certainly feel the difference on your person when you are outside. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to, first off though, we're going to focus on the tropics. We do have, it looks like we're going to have a tropical storm out in the Atlantic by tomorrow at this time. And I'm going to bring up, thanks to tropicaltidbits.com, and our buddy Levi Cowan, you are seeing, and this is on his on tropicaltidbits.com. If you look on the menu and you go to satellite, you can pull up this view of the coast of Africa and offshore. And there is a low pressure system, a very vigorous low pressure system has moved off the coast of Africa from Senegal. It's actually closer to Senegal than it is to the Cabo Verde Islands, which you can see are on the, if you go to the northwest of where all the convection is, that is where the Cabo Verde Islands are, and it looks like this will impact the southernmost islands. The Hurricane Center has kind of put up a preemptive tropical storm warning up for that particular area. We have a potential tropical cyclone here. They haven't made it officially a tropical depression, mainly because, excuse me, the convection there is not tightly, there's not a concentration of convection near the circulation center. You could definitely see the turning that is going on, and I suspect that in about 24 hours or so, you probably are going to have that tight ball of convection developing, and that this will indeed become Tropical Storm Florence. So we'll bring the map up full, and there we go, and you can take it here. I'm going to see it. Maybe I could switch off to the visible shot. We won't have too many visible pictures here, but we'll have at least some. Actually, we only have a couple of frames of them. But you can see the turning of the cloud. So there's definitely a low-level swirl there underneath. But the convection, you can see how it's kind of sparsed on either side. There's almost a large area of thin clouds either side of the east side and the west side of the convection. So once that fills in, at that point, you'll probably have a more tropical system, and you'll see the Hurricane Center do some kind of upgrade. And by the way, there's another wave behind it, and you can see the flare-up of thunderstorms that are going on to the east, and those are also moving westward. So that'll probably be coming off the African coast in a couple of days. Now, we're going to go through some of the maps that we usually do when we see these tropical systems, and it's I think it's a good thing to look through all of this, even if this winds up being a fish storm and not impacting any land, just so that we get used to seeing certain maps. This is of course, the hurricane tracking models. We only go out to about 50. It goes out to 50 degrees west. You can see that outside of the Cabo Verde Islands, it's all open water along the way, and you have this west-northwest course. The models are all tightly clustered, which gives you a very tight degree of confidence, and then they all kind of add a little bit more northward component of motion late in the forecast period, out past day 6, day 7, day 8, and having it start to move north of 20 and eventually north of 25, and some, actually a couple of the models have it almost to 30 degrees north by the end of their forecast periods. Now, this is not a surprise considering what we're seeing in the upper air, but when I show you that, I'm going to talk about a few different things that are going on. Okay, so we'll go to the intensity models. Again, all of this on tropicaltidbits.com. If you go to current storms, you'll find it. All of the models strengthen this at least to tropical storm. You have a few of them that take it to minimal hurricane. The Hurricane Center is going, pretty much holding on to this. I think the biggest issue is the fact that while the water temperatures are warm enough to sustain tropical storm strength and maybe even get it to minimal hurricane strength, you really don't have the water warm enough until you go west of 45 degrees west to generate something stronger than a Category 1. And that's the difference between this year and last year. The surface water temperatures are running about a degree Celsius below normal, and that's a critical degree. There's a big difference between what can be sustained at 27 degrees Celsius versus 28 degrees Celsius, which would, could certainly sustain a 2 or a 3 hurricane, to 29 degrees Celsius. And last year we were dealing with water that was in the 29 to 30 degrees Celsius east of the Leeward Islands, which accounts for the fact that we had 3 Category 5 hurricanes in 5 weeks pass through that general area. So the cooler water, this is where the impact, you're going to see it, in that it'll slow the strengthening down a bit, and it doesn't prevent tropical storms from developing. The waters are warm enough for that, but as far as getting into anything other than minimal hurricane, it's going to be a struggle unless they get west of 50 or 55 degrees west. Now, where are we going with all of this? Okay, so we have the new GFS out. It's one of the reasons why I decided on a late start. This is going to take a while to get out of the way. We're going to look at it on the surface first, and then I'm going to bring up the upper air to illustrate what is going on. But there's your system here. Pressure's pretty low. I mean, it really, if you get to a 980 pressure down south of the Cabo Verde Islands, that would be a minimal hurricane. This is by Saturday morning. Remains to be seen whether that'll be achieved or not. This, I think, will also be a pretty a good test to see, just exactly how strong the system's going to be, because the models could be reacting by showing a stronger system and going to the upper layers of the atmosphere to find the steering currents, rather than if you had a weaker system, probably would respond more to the stronger low-level easterlies that exist, and it would take it on a track further to the west. So how strong it gets, I think, is going to be critically important in terms of the overall track. By Tuesday, I mean, we're barely to 40 degrees, just barely west of 40 degrees west at this point, and almost approaching 20 degrees north. Usually storms that are this far north and that far east don't ever make it to the United States. There are exceptions to this, but the vast majority of storms in this position, when they're already moving northwestward or north-northwestward, they don't often change back to the west. Now, you'll notice there's a cold front that is running from off the New England coast, and this is on Wednesday. There's some kind of front offshore that extends up into a low that's between Greenland and Iceland. So there's an upper trough that's here. That's the reason why the system is moving northward. It's exploiting a weakness that's in the upper atmosphere. Now, you do get a bit of a ridge that builds in, but then notice, And I think this is going to be important. This is going to be very important here. You've got a rather strong cold front. There's a big high that's coming down later next week north of Lake Winnipeg with a lead cold front that runs into the eastern Great Lakes by next Friday. And then by Friday afternoon, evening, that front is to the east coast. And you've got a pretty, for this time of year, a 1035 high over Lake Superior. That's a pretty strong pressure. So there's another stronger shortwave trough here that's moving into southeastern Canada. So here are the questions in my mind. Is that trough real? Because models have been going back and forth on this. If the trough is overdone for whatever reason, it may not extend far enough south to pull this thing up north and east. That is what the model solution is here, by the way. If you look, that trough is going to reach down, pull it up to the northeast, and then, you know, from there it's just goodbye. It actually kind of sits at east of Newfoundland. This is in 16 days, by the way, and it's still east of Newfoundland at this time as a hurricane. But let's look at what's going on in the upper atmosphere, and this will really tell the story quite well. So here's that first trough, and it's going to exploit the weakness with the first trough. I'm going to I'll put it up on the paint box because I think this is something that we can take a look at. And you know, if this is a non-event, at least this I think is a good lesson to what to look for, because you know, when you watch the upper atmosphere in motion, it's, you know, I often make the analogy of the gearbox, the old gear toy that they used to give toddlers, where it was a puzzle and you would put the gears in, and when you got all the gears, there was a little handle, and when you turn it, you know, you turned one gear and all the other gears would turn. That's basically how the atmosphere works, except that the difference being that the gears are constantly changing in size and in shape, and they're moving around all over the place. So that makes it a bit different, but the concept is the same, because the one gear is going to be responding to the other as they move. So just give me a second here. I'm going to try to get that paint box up. It's being difficult on me. There we go. Okay, so here's the upper air. Okay, so what is going on? All right, well, let's in red we'll outline the flow in the upper atmosphere. First off, big upper high next Wednesday sitting in Pennsylvania and Ohio. So your westerlies are displaced pretty far to the north up into whoops, bad arrow, southeastern Canada. Then you've got northwest winds aloft from the Canadian Maritimes out into the Atlantic Ocean. Here's your trough, and there's your weakness in the Atlantic that is going to try to pull well, this would be Florence, and Florence is evident inside that circle there. That's the representation of Florence. Okay, so here's your oops, let's get the brushes back. All right, so here's your upper high in the east. I'm not really adept at drawing with a mouse very well, but again, exploiting the weakness in the trough, this thing is going to want to go northward, more northwestward. I have the arrow drawn more northward, but you get the idea here with that trough. But that trough is going to be lifting out. So we'll go back to the GFS map, and here we go. So that trough winds up bypassing it, but it leaves the weakness there. The upper ridge, you see there's another upper high to the east of it, the upper high to the west of it. There's kind of that hole in the middle. It moves up. Now, here comes that short wave that's in eastern Canada, and you see it there. That is what comes down and really picks it up and takes it northward and keeps it as a fish storm. So the question is, the big question is, with regards to this second upper trough, and this is toward the end of next week. So a week from now, we'll be dealing with this issue. Here is, back to the paint box. And there we go. So, okay, so here's the second trough that's coming into play, right in here. Okay, you got this big upper low that's sitting east of Labrador. So you got this trough that's moving through New England in the northeast, and now you've got this new weakness, and this would draw it straight northward. But what if this trough is not as deep? What if this trough is even flatter, and this upper ridge is a little bit stronger? Suppose that upper ridge is more like this because of the weaker trough. You know, there's evidence on the model runs that the ridge wants to be stronger. You know, that would, you know, perhaps make this trough weaker, and that could possibly leave this thing lingering for a while. Or maybe the upper ridge builds back a little further east and it gets underneath it and it starts getting deflected to the northwest. I think this is, you know, I'm illustrating possibilities here. I think the idea of that happening right now, I would rate it as a long shot, because all of the models, including the European and including the Canadian, show that this thing would stay out. And I think that makes the most sense when you look at storms in situations like this. When you look at climatology, this is what happens. Most of the time, they wind up being fish storms and not being an issue. But you know what? They're always interesting to watch while they're in the development phase. You oftentimes do see model changes along the way, and I think it's important that at least we understand what exactly we're dealing with here going forward in case things do change. Now, on to the next issue in the tropics, and this the Hurricane Center does mention. So I'm bringing up the satellite loop here. You're seeing the Eastern Caribbean. Actually, you're seeing all of the Caribbean, really, and also the South Atlantic. We have a large area of disturbed weather that is developed from the northern Leeward Islands across Puerto Rico and toward the Dominican Republic. And this is a tropical wave, a very disorganized tropical wave that is moving westward or west-northwestward, and gradually you'll be seeing those rains spreading northwestward to the rest of the Dominican Republic and eventually to Cuba, and probably eventually even into parts of South Florida. This is the system that models days ago were eventually organizing it and developing something off the westernmost Bahamas, and then crossing it across South Florida, and then taking it across the Gulf toward the central Gulf Coast. We can look at today's GFS and take a look at what it's done now, because we're getting closer to this time frame here. So you would suspect that you would probably see, if something was going to happen, it would be showing it more than less. And one of the things that has happened is, as we've gone through each model run, it doesn't seem to be, you know, doing much with it. That doesn't necessarily, you know, mean that nothing is going to happen. Let me just make that clear. There are many times where models don't catch the development of these systems too well, or they show up in the long range and then somehow they get lost in the mid-range, and then they come back toward the end. But when we look at this view, you'll notice, by the way, that there's convection every day that develops in the Gulf of Mexico, because you do have lower than normal pressures that are going to be developing there. The tropical wave going into next week, you can barely find it. I mean, at least a few days ago, it showed up as, you know, an obvious kinking in the isobars, and even a little surface low would develop or get closed off. But it's not really doing that. I mean, there's a little kink in the isobar here on Monday, where, you know, there's probably some kind of inverted trough from the southeastern Gulf, south of the Keys, across the Florida Peninsula. And this, of course, causes convection to get enhanced there over Florida on Tuesday. And, whoops, on Tuesday, right, there we go. and then it doesn't. Then you see the swirl here, how it has the precip swirled up. So there's probably some kind of weak low here. There's a 10-16 isobar, so there's probably some kind of weak little low here, which takes the convection across the Gulf States, but it never really does very much with it. In fact, here we are at next Friday, sitting off the Texas coast. There's a tiny little closed isobar. That is really the reflection of that tropical system. Okay, so right now, when we look at the GFS, when we look at the Canadian model, I'll bring that up. The Canadian model doesn't really show much of anything at all. The European, which up until now, of all the models, has been really the most bullish. I mean, you do see. I'll bring up a better view of this. We'll use we'll take those colors off. There is some kind of low pressure here east of the Texas coast. This is a week from today. I'll back it up, and we'll just see how it gets there if we could even find it. And you can just barely see a kinking of the isobar here. It's almost hard to find now. It's backed off. The last couple of runs had some kind of surface low going toward New Orleans. So even the European has backed off on this idea. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it won't come back on tonight's run or tomorrow's run. Certainly when I look at the upper air, we have this big upper high pretty far to the north. That to me, whenever I've seen, whenever you see something like this in the upper atmosphere where the upper ridge is pretty far to the north, that creates an opportunity, let's say a zone across the Gulf States and east of the Bahamas where under certain conditions, you get a tropical wave to get in there, you could wind up seeing something developing. And in fact, at least in the upper air, there's some kind of closed upper low here in the western Gulf. I don't know if that necessarily reflects a tropical system or not, but certainly the upper air would suggest that we could have at least conditions that would be favorable for something to develop. But you got to have a system that has some structure to it, because if it doesn't have structure to it, you could have all the right conditions in the world. Nothing's going to develop there unless you've got a well-defined wave of some kind. But again, just to illustrate where all of this is going as we move through the next several days. Now, let's come back home and we'll go to the GFS. We'll bring up the moisture field. We'll come back to present time, and you guys can see everything. So we've got this weak frontal boundary that moved through. Amazing to me that we had all this happen with this front coming through, and we couldn't even we hardly could get any clouds to develop because of all the subsidence with the northwest winds today. But high pressure is up in eastern Canada there, heading for the Canadian Maritime. So at least from Maryland, Delaware, north and east over the next 2 days, an onshore wind, clouds, and some downpours in a few places will keep temperatures in the 70s. Hooray, hooray. And it looks like some rough weather coming up for tomorrow night in the upper Midwest with low pressure that's headed up toward Minnesota. And that's going to push its way into the eastern lakes as we go over the weekend. Here in the east, after Saturday, we'll start to get into that warm and more humid flow. That front to the south is going to basically fall apart, and we'll go to a southwest flow, which will bring the humidity back up next week, and it'll bring back the heat to some degree, although I don't think it's going to get to what we just had. But you know what? Stranger things have happened. We could wind up going a little bit higher than what guidance is saying. And then, there's kind of another backdoor front here on Tuesday that's way up in upstate New York that never makes it any further south than upstate New York and central New England. And then that's gone. So we have to wait till late next week for that next trough and short wave. And this is the one that is going to pick up the tropical system that we're watching now approaching the southern Cabo Verde Islands. This is a pretty sizable high. If this gets in here, we're going to get some nice cool air from Canada with a rather gusty northeast wind. But I'm very I'm just suspicious of it, okay? I'm suspicious of the GFS seemingly having a really tough time lately with the strength of the ridge in the east and how much cool air and how much troughing that you can get to come down out of Canada. But I really, from my own personal standpoint, I really would love to see this happen, if only to get a couple of really nice fresh air days around here with a beautiful ocean breeze. And actually, the gradient is, that would be breezy up and down the East Coast, up from the Carolinas all the way up into southern New England, and it would probably be rather breezy from the Delmarva Peninsula down through the Carolinas. Again, this is all lovely and in theory, but who knows if we're going to have an almost 1040-ish high sitting in the Gulf of Maine a week from Sunday. That is the big question. And then that moves out, another front goes by, and then it happens all over again as we go through the end of the period. Another high comes down and moves into eastern Canada with a push of cooler, drier air coming into the northeast and into the mid-Atlantic states. So, very interesting next couple of weeks. I'll bet you that there'll probably be another tropical storm or two that'll come into the mix when we move through the first couple of weeks of September. The European has a couple of systems coming out. The GFS does as well. Now, in terms of rainfall over the next 7 days, the rainfall that's shown in the east is indicative of what's happening pretty much between now and Monday. But the rainfall amounts are generally under 1.5 inches. But Johnny Quest just disproved that theory with the thunderstorms that went through in western Virginia today. Big rains continue in the upper Mississippi Valley and in the upper Midwest, because they're on the border there of where the Canadian jet lies and the ridge that's to its south and east, and also a stripe of heavy rains from South Florida and the west coast of Florida, south of Tampa, with some 3, 4, 5-inch rain amounts over the next 7 days, and I'm sure it will be locally higher than that with that tropical wave coming through. And then another max area of 5 inches plus in southeastern Louisiana and down into coastal Mississippi and Alabama, and that extends over into the Texas coast. So you're definitely getting, the saturation of the atmosphere, where the tropical impacts, which we really didn't see very much of at all in August, with the tropics being the subtropics and the subtropics being on the dry side. We're seeing a general saturation of the tropical and subtropical zone. By the way, here are the severe weather risks tonight. You have that marginal risk in western Virginia and West Virginia, where if that's already played out and that risk extends eastward from there. We have a small area of marginal risk in northern Arkansas, southern Missouri, and another area of marginal risk in Iowa, western Iowa, in through the southern, a good chunk of Minnesota and extreme eastern Nebraska. So if you're watching this on a replay, remember that whatever radars we show you are dated, and you should check for the latest radar and the latest any severe thunderstorm watches or warnings or any warnings of any kind to go to your local National Weather Service office at weather.gov. Not a whole lot in terms of watches and warnings up. We have a little bit of flash flood, some flood watches up for parts of Wisconsin. They had some heavy thunderstorms there over the last couple of days, so the flood threshold is pretty low. Otherwise, there really isn't too much from the standpoint of severe weather risk going on, and some looks like some. I think is that excessive. That's got to be red flag issues up through western Colorado into southern Iowa. Let me just double check on that for you. So I'll come back full screen. There we go. I'll come up to the front here. And I'm going to just off camera, let me just make sure, see what those are. Sometimes the colors between that and excessive heat are pretty close, but I figured it was a red flag warning. And it is. It's for fire issues in parts of Wyoming and in the northwestern part of Colorado. Most of the rain that we've seen has been, on the east side of the Rockies lately with some of the thunderstorms. and not so much on the west side. All right, let me come back to the board here where everybody is. And first and foremost, let me just say thank you to Clorox Bleach. Thank you very much for hitting Super Chat. And David Schwartz, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for hitting Super Chat. Now, as I don't always do, but we'll do it again as I look at the chat board. Johnny Quest comes under the wire first. Mirtha Gunter for place. William Uber for show. And let's see. Where are we? You guys have been carrying on the conversation all by yourselves today. So we have, oh, Jason, there we go. Oh, I had the board pulled up. All right, so it was Johnny Quest. Mirtha Gunter was second. The rest of the, William Uber was third. And we'll round out the superfecta today with Charlie Baker. And James NASCAR fan rounds out the super high five. Thanks everybody for being here. I really appreciate it. I will try Charlie Baker to cool it off for the weekend. Certainly Friday and Saturday, the next 2 days, will be a lot better with regards to the temperatures at least. The dew points are not going to drop very far, but the temperatures at least. Jeff from Ellicott City. You guys got flooded earlier this season. Hopefully it's gone a bit better for you. There's some more storms on the radar to your west. And Johnny Quest saying he can fish and mow the grass at the same time. I know you've been really hit very, very hard. Resident statistician tonight, Anthony Orr. On this date in 1942, the Matagorda, Texas hurricane made landfall as a Category 3, 15-foot storm surge in Matagorda, Texas. There'll be a lot of anniversaries coming up. Clorox Bleach, are you formerly known as Blorox Cleach? I just was kind of curious about that. Delvin is on. Dave R is here. Jason Schaefer. Always good. Always good. I'm sorry. What did you do? Priscilla Mayu. Sorry, it's been a while since I've been here. The area in the Caribbean has your attention. That tropical wave does need to be watched. Even though the models don't do much with it, the fact that you've got that upper air set up the way it is something that you just kind of have to pay a little bit of attention to. Chances are nothing will come of it, but if you've got that upper air set up that way, you got to pay a little bit of attention. How is the weather for Boston on Thursday, September 6th? Temperature, humidity, sky, and precip, asks Delvin. Well, that's going to be before that next cold front, if it's real. So it looks like you're going to be, very warm. You're going to be hot and humid again through that part of the week. Probably get up into the low 90s, I would think, with a west wind going into Thursday night into Friday. Doesn't look like you'll have any precip to worry about. That next front's not going to come through until sometime Friday night. So, by the way, why don't we, might as well just bring the dew point map up and show you guys. So let me just do that really fast. And you can see how miserable it's going to get eventually. I'll bring it back up here. Hang on one second. So we'll bring the dew points up. Whoops. There we go. So here's your dew point map. Let me bring the date and time into view. All right. So this is from yesterday, actually. So here's your break for Friday. This was today. I'm sorry. I keep jumping a day ahead. I woke up this morning. I was so out of it. I thought it was Saturday. Actually get some dew points down in the 50s, so there's a little bit of dew point relief that tries to drain down the Hudson Valley. But notice dew points in the 70s tomorrow morning down through Virginia, North Carolina. That's where they'll stay. So a little bit of relief here for Friday, but you start to get those dew points back up on Saturday, and then by Sunday you're back up to a 70 dew point to northern New Jersey. And look at the dew points across the Great Lakes, because they're back up into the mid-70s. That's that upper ridge building in the eastern part of the U.S. And here's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Here's that, by the way, the back door that is shown on Tuesday never really makes it any further south than right along the Canadian border. A little bit of dew point relief Tuesday night into Wednesday into Maine and New Hampshire, and then it pulls out. You still got 70 dew points on Thursday, and then here comes the front for Friday with your 70 dew points, and then finally, look at this real dew point relief, folks. Next weekend, you got dew points in the 20s and low 30s. You can only hope and pray that that's right. Okay. And by the way, just for laughs, let's look at what the 2-meter temperature is. These are lows. These are Saturday. Again, I am highly suspicious. Now, here's Friday's highs, middle 90s. Okay, on the GFS, middle 90s. Now, please be careful. You got to be careful with this because the GFS has been notorious in blowing up numbers all summer long. If you think back on a couple of occasions where we had, triple-digit numbers flying on the GFS, that didn't happen. But here are the temperatures on Saturday. You've got 40s and even 30s in upstate New York, and by Sunday morning, you've got middle 30s through Maine, Vermont, upstate New York, and not that far upstate New York where that 38 is by Sunday morning. And again, this is all hinging on whether is the GFS right on this run? And I would be very, very careful with regards to that, okay? Because we just don't know. This could be just a one-run thing. It's been trying to show some kind of short wave with a high up there. The European has a much flatter look to it, but the European also has the system that's coming off the African coast now, going into a bigger weakness in the Atlantic, so it would still be a fish storm anyway. So it kind of emphasizes the variables in a bit of a different way. Let's see, David Schwartz. You don't want any tropical storms or hurricanes near Florida. I don't blame you. Corey Bodziak, no, not Harvey 2-0. Listen, I know it's kind of easy to go to those extreme experiences that we have, that we've seen, or in the case of areas in the Northeast, every time, from here on in for many years, we're going to do this, going to be doing this for years. Every time there's a hurricane threat, there's going to be a reflexive comparison to Sandy. In Texas, anytime there's any kind of tropical storm or hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico that's heading toward them, there's going to be a reflexive, it's going to go reflexive to Harvey. And they've got more storms to pick from. Louisiana, New Orleans, they go to Katrina. South Florida, they're going to go to Hurricane Andrew. Southwest Florida is going to go to Hurricane Charlie or Wilma. So there are always these reflexive reactions, but it's not the same. Okay, until we actually see what we're dealing with, it's all speculation, of course. And yes, Jason Schaefer, October. I love the fall. That's my favorite time of year. When you get tired of the heat and humidity, and you get some nice, cool weather that is just so refreshing and so enjoying. Ghost in the Shell, another bad hair day for Joe. And well, it was a little bit of a better bad hair day today. It wasn't as bad a bad hair day. Let's put it that way. Dark Legend, capture more of my screen. I think I'm capturing all I can capture. I try to make some of the maps a big. I try to zoom in on some of them to make them bigger than they actually are. But if you could let me know specifically which map, I'll try and do that. The problem is, I only have so much space, and then if I get really tight, I'm going to lose all the other perspective. And let's see, AS, a nightmare in Naples with trying to evacuate. I assume that was probably a reference to Hurricane Irma from last year. We just had the anniversary, Stephen White, of Irene. The Sandy anniversary is not till later October. And Patricia Jackson noting the Tropical Storm Florence, and you live in Florence, South Carolina. Well, right now it really doesn't look like that any tropical system that comes out of there is going to be able to make it all the way across. It's got a lot of things working against it that would suggest that it will stay out to sea. But well, this is a good. It's very important. Obviously, it's important when you're watching these storms and you're dealing with something that you know is going to be a threat or has a fairly good chance of becoming a threat. But it's also important to look at the ones that wind up not being a threat because they give you a greater understanding of how the upper air works and how these storms work and how they function and the interrelationship between the winds, the steering winds in the tropics, and then the stronger westerlies to the north and everything that goes on in between. So this kind of gives you an understanding of the dynamic nature of the atmosphere and how things change and how those changes impact everything that is on there. Delvin pointing out, as he points out correctly, is the sun angle August 30th matches the sun angle from April 12th, just to show the scale of how long the summer solstice passed and how much daylight we lost. I did, and I notice it now when I run out to dinner sometimes, and I come back. Now it's dark at before 8 o'clock, so we're getting there. The summer solstice is 3 weeks away. Long duration rain event for you? I don't think so. I mean, I think today was an exception, if only because of the fact that frontal boundary is playing through, but we don't have a supercharged warm front that's coming up. So, and we also don't have a deep upper trough that's impacting you. There's more, you're more in a ridge position. So I'm tending to think that could you get a little cluster of thunderstorms that sits over you and just dumps inches of rain? Sure, but I think that would probably be the exception more than the rule going through the weekend and into next week. But while we're in that tropical pattern next week with that big upper high, and gradually we are bringing tropical moisture into the equation here, you probably will see active scattered clusters of thunderstorms developing during the afternoon and evening as we go through the weekend, but particularly as we go through next week until that next front decides what it is that it's going to do. Okay, so I think we'll call it a day at this point. All right, Israel, you jumped on late, so I'll give you this one question because then I got to wrap it up. Can we see cooler, more pleasant weather coming up that will hold? I don't think it'll hold. Whatever you get now, you're gonna, if you start getting shortwave troughs from Canada, bringing those upper air westerlies down further south, you will get highs that'll come in that will last for a couple of days, and then they'll pull out, and then the next one will come on in. So you'll have warm-ups in between, but if there's an absence of that ridge in the east, if that disappears, the warm-ups will then be just rather muted, and they won't be like what we experienced this week and what we'll probably experience during next week. All right, folks, got to call it a night at this point. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here, and thanks again to Clorox Bleach and to David Schwartz for hitting Super Chat tonight. I really appreciate it very much. We are going to do the Joe and Joe Show tonight on Facebook, and that's on my Facebook page, Meteorologist Joe Cioffi, or on Joe Rayo's Facebook page, Joe Rayo Weather. So do tune in. I have been having loads of trouble trying to upload those shows to YouTube. For some reason, Facebook is not letting me download and save my videos so that I can upload them to YouTube. I don't know what's going on. They've been doing a lot of technical changes on Facebook, on the Facebook page, so it could be a bug that's developed, and they are notorious about taking forever to resolve issues. Trust me, I've got one particular issue that I'm dealing with them. I don't even understand why I even have this issue to begin with. It's been almost a month, and it's a simple matter of somebody, I guess, just like clicking on something to get it to work, and I can't talk to anyone. No one responds to me. It's very, very frustrating. They are extremely difficult to deal with, and especially when you're trying to do something like what I'm doing, where you're trying to run something with regards to a functional weather page, and you're dealing with bots that think what you're posting is against their policy. You put up weather maps and they're mistaken for something else. I don't even want to say what they're mistaken for, because then something will, a bot will pick it up. And I've had that happen. You've known my experience. I've had when I had my cat. Those of you who remember my cat and what he used to do while it was on camera, which was hilarious. But the bots didn't think so I had to straighten that out. So I don't know what their problem is. I've just kind of thrown my hands up. So you have to be there because that's where your audience is. But I love doing my YouTube live streams, and I have to tell you, quite honestly, when I'm home and I'm about to do, thinking about doing a live stream, I come to my YouTube channel first. My audience here is terrific. I love interacting with you guys. You great questions. I really truly enjoy it. I have the same experience on Facebook, but with my audience. But dealing with the Facebook platform has been a nightmare sometimes, and I really appreciate the ease of doing the YouTube live stream. It's just click and go, and that's a good thing. A&M Weather, thank you, hitting super chat late. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. I don't know why you said you were getting errors. I mean, sometimes that happens. I'm not sure what it is. Every once in a while there are some technical hiccups that go through the YouTube and the Google system. I don't know why it does. Those things happen. But thank you. You got through. I really appreciate it. And yeah, Delvin, that's a big issue with me with Facebook. That is a very big issue with regards to Facebook, is the fact that I have people, everyone tells me I have my notification set, but I'm not getting your video, your live streams when you go on. Or if I do get the notification, I'm getting it 3 or 4 hours later. I don't understand that. Jason, I have really kind of refrained from, and as I do here, I really try not to get too involved or even involved at all in political discussions, because they just lead to wailing and gnashing of teeth. Do I have Patreon? Yes, I do. I do have Patreon. I have not as yet made it public because I'm in the process of putting a few things together, which includes a new app, a new free app. But I do have Patreon, and I'll put the link up here. Here we go. Now, what Patreon is just so you guys know, my plan is I'm going to be releasing an app version of my website, which this way that will give you notifications, so that when new website posts come up, you'll be notified. This way, if you don't have to worry about Facebook with regards to getting notified about website posts, and also with regards to videos, because I will post the videos directly into the app. So if you can't catch them on the live stream, at the least you can see them, just within a very, very short period of time after they're done. So I'm going to be introducing that hopefully in the next couple of weeks. I have somebody working on this with me, and it's a matter of just trying to find the time to sit down and finishing it up. We're doing a little bit every day. Israel, I don't know, what is that? If that's a link to Patreon. Patreon is a way for what I'm going to be doing is the app is going to be free, but if you would like, you can go to Patreon and set up a monthly donation. I'm asking $2 a month for the app, but no one is obligated to do that. A lot of people use Patreon to have their audience to support what you're doing on what people are doing online. A lot of musicians use Patreon, and it's fairly easy. And in fact, Tropical Tidbits has a Patreon link also, where you can give to him in small amounts on a regular basis. I think he has like $1 a month or $2 a month, different levels. And eventually, what I would like to do is develop some stuff, some original content strictly for Patreon users. So that's something. That's another thing that's in there. But again, no one is obligated to do any of that. I appreciate it that those of you who do, and those of you who have hit Super Chat. And then one other way, just to mention also, that we are participant in the Amazon Services LLC Associates program, which is an affiliate advertising program designed to provide a means for us to earn fees by linking to Amazon and affiliated sites. I also have the same relationship with Ebates. So if you shop on Amazon and you use the link to Amazon that I have up here on the description to this video, you get your stuff. Amazon sends me some coin. I get a cigar out of it, and it's all good. And I thank those of you who have done that. And if you use Ebates to shop on Amazon, you can get up to 5% cash back, which is even better. AS, thank you very much. Becoming a regular Patreon, I really appreciate that. You will be my first then. Thank you so much. All right, folks, coming up on 8:20, we've been on for 51 minutes, and we don't even have any, we don't have any tropical storms or hurricanes threatening the United States. So could you imagine how long the live streams will go when we do? Okay, AS, you'd like the links for as well. Are you talking about Levi? Hang on one second. I'm sure he would appreciate. Here is Levi Cowens. I'm sure he won't mind if I put it up since we are using his maps. There you go. Anyway, let's move on. Time to go, folks. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. Regular live stream tomorrow. I'll be live streaming during the weekend because I'm not working at any other television stations this weekend. I'm taking a break because I need to relax. All right. Have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow.